to cancel culture, hookup culture, or victim culture?
Well, neither could we. We created this platform for those other girls. Girls like us who want to give a different perspective from a Christian and conservative worldview.
We talk about life, work, relationships, pop culture, and everything in between. So let's be those other girls that just don't talk about culture,
but change culture.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to Those Are the Girls with Mallory and Friends. I'm Mallory, and we, me, you, are changing culture and bringing back traditional values. Okay, you guys, I'm super excited for this episode. We have Christopher Johnson. He is the director. You're the marketing director or just managing director. Freeman, you might need to cut that out. Managing director of Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends. And if you have been a longtime listener, you would remember him from episode 50 something. I'll link that in the description. But I'm super happy to have him on again. He is a wealth of knowledge. There's been times where I've had questions about the environment or something I saw on TV, and I have texted him because I don't know how to decipher it. And he has been so kind and gracious and patient with me when it comes to the environmental things. And I really think that this is an important episode as we come into the new election season, because I'm going to be asking questions about that as well. We need to be considering what exactly we need to decipher some truths about what's going on with the environment and climate change. And I think Chris is a great person for that. So without further ado, Chris, welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So, like you said, I'm the managing director of YCCD. We're a C4 organizing young Republicans, college Republicans, Turning Point, all of those folks around the country around climate and energy issues, putting America First principles to work to actually deal with an issue that young people disproportionately care about, which is climate and the environment. So I got into this originally from Ohio, obviously came of age during the fracking boom that happened in the late 2000s, early 2010s, worked in Republican politics. It all sort of came together that it just made sense that conservative solutions both grow the environment and reduce emissions, grow the economy and reduce emissions to protect the environment. So I've been doing this, doing energy and climate work once I moved on from running Republican campaigns to focusing on energy and climate campaigns for the last, 5-6 years. So I'm really excited to be here to talk about this stuff. Obviously, I think it's important. I'm glad that you do as well. And I think heading into the election season, there's a lot of good opportunities to change the narrative, change the discourse, and really have some productive discussions.
Yes, I agree completely. So I asked our audience some questions. I have a couple of questions. Before we get into those questions, I kind of want to define some terms because I do think this is a topic that a lot of people are not like a lot of us, especially on our side, those of us older, because I do think younger Republicans really do care, but like a lot of us older millennial Republicans might not care as much. So we don't, or not necessarily we don't care, we just don't know. Like we're not as, we don't see the urgent need for it. So I think sometimes we just don't know a lot about the topic. Can you kind of explain what exactly is climate change? When people say the climate's changing and you see the girls throwing the paint on the Louvre or whatever, like what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's honestly most effective when conservatives think about it less in terms of like, is it happening? How bad is it? You see, weather events and all this kind of stuff, and the left kind of loses their mind and says some really unhelpful and crazy stuff about our impact on the environment. But the reality is, we have a ton of economic activity and industrial growth that has happened over the last couple hundred years. That does have an impact on the environment. We know that. But as conservatives, we're probably not coming at this from the sort of, AOC, Green New Deal, view of things where the world's ending in 10 years and conveniently, the only solution is socialism, right? What we need to think about it in terms and get our, friends on the right to think about it as is we need to engage on this, not because, it's this world ending problem or whatever, but because, we should steward the environment. Conservation is conservative. But also, too, if we don't engage on this debate and we don't engage on the climate issue itself, we will cede this to the left. We've seen the ideas that they come up with. So when Republicans hear climate change and they back off and they don't want to talk about it because they think about it as a scientific thing or whatever, it's a political problem. It's an economic problem much more than it is a science or environmental problem.
Okay. I like that reframing of it. And that makes more sense to me, at least. Okay, so we've kind of defined that. What are some tangible things that we can do that affects the environment? You were mentioning earlier about the economic standpoint. Like, what are some tangible things that we can do?
I mean, I get this question a lot, and I always give an answer that people kind of roll their eyes at or kind of hate. But vote is probably the most important thing. At an individual level, yes, it's good to recycle. Yes, it's great to buy an electric vehicle or do various different eco-friendly things and get a tote bag and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, the impact that you as an individual have is exponentially bigger through public policy and getting conservative environmental solutions passed through your state house or Congress or whatever. That's where your energy should be spent, because a lot of these individual decisions are kind of drop in the bucket kind of things. What we really need are incentives for clean energy development, incentives for reshoring. I mean, the biggest thing we need is reshoring businesses from places like China and India that pollute at 3 and 4 times the amount that American businesses do. It's hard to. The reason why so many people don't respond well to the Democrats' climate agenda is they know realistically that when Democrats go out there and say you need to buy an EV, you need to live in a pod, eat bugs, whatever the meme is, they know exactly. Don't have kids, all this kind of stuff. People see places like China just polluting with abandon. And it's hard not to think that that's silly, right? And so I never tell people that they should have to change their lifestyle in any kind of significant way, because America is already doing things cleaner. Americans are already doing things cleaner, and we need to have our elected officials in place so that they can hold China to account and deal with their pollution, because that has exponentially more impact than any individual consumer decision that you make.
To what you said initially about voting.
Yeah.
Now we're entering I guess we're in primary season now.
Oh yeah,
there's a bajillion people running. What is something we need to hear a politician say on the Republican side, and I guess the Democrat side too, but let's do Republicans first, because that's who most of us are probably going to vote for. What do we need to be hearing when it comes to the environment? Because right now, I think in the last election or last debate, did they even mention the environment? I don't.
They did. There was one question. There was one question that got asked, and it was fittingly the only youth question that was asked by I think it was a kid from Young Americans for Freedom, but asking about climate and the environment. Honestly, Nikki Haley gave basically the perfect answer on this, and I love it. I just say Nikki and you immediately smile. And she's great.
TOG does not have a specific position. I'm just saying. We don't have a
specific. No. The smile says enough, right? Yeah. She's great. Yeah. A lot of the folks that are running are great. I'd be happy to vote for any of them, but she gave this really great answer when asked about climate, and she's like, she reframes it, right? It's like, why are we talking about, all these things that we need to do here when China and India are polluting with abandon? Well, we need to hold them accountable, right? Like that kind of stuff is exactly what, really resonates with people who care about the environment, because they know that the problem is China and India and that kind of stuff. And if you're basically somebody who is to the right of, the people that are blocking traffic and, all those crazy, sort of leftist activist types, that if we're going to address this issue, it's got to be international. There's got to be more to it, and no amount of throwing paint or protesting or whatever is going to make a difference. So reframing it on China and India is great. The other sort of stuff, like I said, is just getting away from debates about like whether or not climate change is happening or whatever,
Hmm.
because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter from a policy perspective. The environment doesn't care what you believe, right?
Okay.
And the economy doesn't care what you believe, and that's I would argue more important to Republican voters. What really matters is policy. And so, what are you going to do? How are you going to compete with China on clean energy? How are you going to create jobs here at home, good paying jobs that people can rely on for the economy of the future? How are you going to drive innovation here at home? All those kind of things. Those are climate questions, and it doesn't require you to ask in this weird sort of um, green framing of do you believe that the world is coming to an end? Essentially, that's a really unhelpful framing, and Republicans need to stop taking the bait on that and going out there and saying, yeah, it's not real, and using that as like a signal to your voters, your base, that
Hmm.
like I'm a true conservative because I'll go out there and say climate change isn't real. One, that's really lame, and two, it's just not effective. It's just really you lose people, and there's a way to do that without giving up on the Republican base. Because if you don't take the bait, you go say it's China. Like every Republican, regardless of what they believe on the climate issue, is going to be nodding along, going
I was
yes and
gonna
amen.
say, yeah. You say China and might have, what? Yeah,
exactly,
China
exactly,
or Russian, but anyway.
exactly. That too. Yeah, that one's a little more complicated, but
Yeah.
not flawless.
Okay. Um. So okay. So what is an example of something that you have helped, or someone you know has helped, or things that you are in the works on that needs to be passed policy wise to help the environment? Can you give an example of something?
Yeah, the best example is Kevin Cramer of North Dakota has a bill in the Senate called the Prove It Act. And what that does is it essentially takes what we're talking about, the emissions from China, and actually calculates it and actually tries to figure out what's called America's carbon advantage is. So the idea is that America, because we have better environmental standards, better technology, better, all that kind of stuff, we have a lot cleaner manufacturing than China and India and all these other places. We know it's about 3 times cleaner than the rest of the world.
We are.
Yes,
What?
and what the bill does is it actually calculates that so that we could put that into action, right? So one of the best ways that we could put it into action is something like a pollution import fee, which effectively works like a carbon tariff. So it would price the pollution itself at the border from China, from India, from Russia, giving our manufacturers a huge boost. So this is step one in getting a policy like that on the books that actually holds China accountable. It's called the Prove It Act. Kevin Cramer in North Dakota is doing a great job of getting people excited about that. We are continuing to motivate young Republicans across the country to vocalize their support for that kind of stuff. And it'd be really, really great to see more and more Republicans get on board. And it's not like Kevin Cramer's, a squishy rhino moderate or whatever. I mean, he's a solid conservative and he's getting on board with this stuff. I think we're going to see more and more of that moving forward.
Oh, that's good. And I'm glad that there's things in the works, because I think
Oh, yeah.
that's another thing that when you're talking to people on the left that don't necessarily, that are like, oh yeah, Republicans don't care about climate, it's good to
Hmm.
have like something in the works and to be able to like articulate that too.
Well, especially when the Biden administration and Democrats are getting wall-to-wall headlines for the so-called Inflation Reduction Act and all of
Right.
the green spending that's in that. But on the flip side of that, when you ask voters if they know what's in the Inflation Reduction Act, most of them don't.
Yeah.
So there is an opportunity for us to go on offense here that we're not taking advantage of.
Let's see here. Um, hmm. I'm just trying to figure out which question I said. Okay, so when it comes to, we've been having a lot of weather things. There was the big, um, well, I guess Hillary wasn't that bad. But before, like, the past year. Last year, there's a lot of heat waves. I think last year they had that huge tsunami in California.
Mm.
There's all the stuff that happened in Maui, and
Mhm.
they're saying climate change, climate change, climate change, climate change. What is fact? What is fiction about all of this weather things that are happening?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I've been getting that a lot recently. It's there's so I effectively have two answers. One, the degree to which the folks on the left will say this is caused by climate change, they make the causal argument, is nonsense. This stuff has been happening forever. Um, what I would concede is that there is some impact of climate change on this, making them worse and happen more often. And that's something that, insurance companies, banks, economists, lots of people who are not leftist climate activists are taking into account, right? I mean, we're seeing insurance companies leave places like California. One, because California is just a tough place to do business, but also two, because of wildfires. Insurance companies are struggling in Florida right now, and thankfully Governor DeSantis has taken action on that. But it's a reality that these things are made worse, but definitely not caused by climate change. The second part of that answer is less fun. Honestly, again, I'm not sure it matters to the policy debate, to the political debate. Yes, the left is going to use this, but the more that we take the bait and go in, and so you have, Biden saying that, the Maui wildfires are evidence of, the climate crisis, right? For one, the devastation that we're seeing in Maui is also directly downstream of the Biden administration's failures to prevent these kind of things. So it's blaming climate change is kind of dark. But instead of taking the bait when he says this is clear evidence of the climate crisis, and then we go no it's not, or debate whether or not the degree to which it's caused by climate change or whatever, we miss opportunities to debate them on, like, okay, even if it is, what's your solution here? How are we going to actually reduce emissions? What are you going to do about China? What are you doing to actually do stuff that doesn't, I mean, one of the best ways to push on this is, if we're in a crisis, right? If all of these things are, caused by climate change and whatever, why are we still using outdated permitting reforms that were made in the 70s that make it so that it takes a decade to build a clean energy project, right? That should be the retort is, okay, if you really believe that, why are you a hypocrite on regulations, permitting, China, all that kind of stuff, rather than getting bogged down in the, like, oh, is it real? Is it really caused by this? Honestly, not to you, I'm on the younger end of millennial, so I'm not a Zoomer, but I'll use the Zoomer language of, it's just cringe. It just makes me cringe every time these guys will go out there, and it's usually the sort of like Daily Wire type guys, and they're like, oh, can you believe that they called it, blamed it on climate change or whatever, and you're like, I mean, yeah, like, but how are we going to fight back?
Yes, and that's what I like. That's the main purpose I want to have of this podcast. Like, how do we, like, what are our, I mean, you've given some already, but like, that's like, we have to say something. We have to have a retort, because if, you said this earlier, if we don't have a retort, then the left is just going to be in charge of everything. They're going to, and that's what the kids are thinking about. And I'm saying the kids, but people like, we're
Our
older,
age.
but
Yeah, no, it's and it's funny too, because, like, I think there's this assumption, right, that if you start talking about climate policy, right, that means a move to the middle. That means getting more moderate, agreeing with the left on a bunch of stuff or whatever. None of what I'm advocating for is a move to the middle at all. This is all stuff that is straight from the America First Trump playbook, right? I'm talking about trade. I'm talking about China. I'm talking about draining the swamp, getting government out of the way, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't require us to, like, move to the middle and be like, well, maybe some regulations, maybe some taxes, maybe some, none of that. All that we need to do is use the playbook that we already have and just apply it to the climate stuff. And with how unpopular Biden is right now and how unpopular the Democrats are on a wide range of issues, this is just another opportunity to jump in and actually, fight them while they're weak. and on an issue, especially on an issue that they don't know how to have this debate at all. Like they're so used to the is it real debate with Republicans. If every time I debate folks on the left on this stuff, they lose because they don't know how to respond.
Yeah.
And they basically concede that I'm right.
Yeah. Yeah. That I just think that it's really, I think that it's really important to make sure, and I've said this already, but I'm just going to say it again. Really important to make sure that we have a response.
Mhm.
We have to have a response. They are, I'm thinking of some people I know, well, I'm not gonna say I know them because they probably listen, but some people I know, and they are very much kind of more to the left and really nice people. I'm nothing against them. We agree on other things, but there's such an attitude of they just don't know. The people on the right, they think that you have to eat all this meat. They think that you they think veganism is so evil and wrong. They just don't know. They just don't know. And I think that when, you do debates and like when other people who are, I guess, Republican more on our side, when they are able to give a good retort, it needs to be highlighted more. What is stopping you and others from being, I don't know, like, not necessarily being on Ben Shapiro, but like, why isn't mainstream or conservative Inc., as they say, talking about this?
Well, there's a couple reasons. One, the age factor is huge.
Okay,
There's
fair.
just a big gap in who cares about this based on age. Basically, the under 40 crowd is all in, loves this stuff. The over 40 crowd is totally ambivalent to maybe outright hostile to this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I spoke at CPAC this past year, which was great.
Nice.
So we do get boosted by Conservative Inc., a decent amount. I was on a panel with Congressman Byron Donalds and Joe Pinion,
Okay,
who's on Newsmax, and Nate Hochman, who's formerly of National Review and of the DeSantis campaign. And we're talking about this at a Conservative Inc., place. But that room was, it was sponsored by the college Republicans, but that room was filled to the brim, but it was only people basically under 30, right? And the
oh,
only
wow.
people in the room who weren't were not skeptical in a really negative way, but they came up and they had the most questions. They're like, "What is this? Why do you guys care about this?" That kind of stuff. So it's kind of a winding answer, but that's like a good example of this age gap. Because whenever I'm talking to your rank and file CPAC attendee, they're not in the same headspace, and so
Yeah.
that's, and the people running Conservative Inc. right now are in that age demographic, right? They're Gen X, they're baby boomers. It just hasn't clicked. So part of it is just the conservative climate movement is like ACC was founded 5 years ago, YCCD was founded 3 years ago. So like we've just got to kind of mature and grow. And the second part of it is sort of part of that as well. When you look at environmental philanthropy, so philanthropy focused on environment, climate, whatever, 98% of that money goes to left of center causes. So only 2% of environmental philanthropy goes to explicitly right of center organizations like us, like ACC, like Republican, all these great organizations. So if you could see that kind of grow, and conservatives sort of go, wow, this is an opportunity for us, we could, see some significant scale that really makes an impact in a way that the sort of stalwarts in Conservative Inc., I hate using that as pejorative, but I don't know what else to call it. To make them pay attention, we need that kind of organizational scale. So it's a combination of maturing the movement, both the people in the movement and the organizations themselves, and scale. And that's true for a lot of political causes, the second one, but the first one is so unique to the environmental stuff that I just turned 31, and that's pretty much like there's a couple folks older than me within the movement, but not a lot.
Yeah. I think, you're very right about the age, because I just really, everybody that I know that truly is like, we have to do something on either side are all, I want to say like 25 and younger.
Yeah.
Not even like, I mean, you know, I'm 28 and I don't even think anybody around my age, none of my friends around my age like care that much. I mean, you know, everybody recycles. So I think that's just something that we've all, by now we've all had that in, okay, you recycle and like tiny things like that. But, you know, everything else, I just feel like people just aren't as, I think it is an age thing, I guess, because they started talking about it more, I think, with younger people.
Yeah, and it's something that they've heard forever. I mean, when I was in school, it wasn't talked about as if it was like up for debate, really. It was just kind of an assumed thing. It was more about what are we going to do about it, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what they've grown up with, and what I think to a certain degree we've grown up with too. And also, like, your priorities change as you get older, right?
Yeah.
You know, I just had a baby 4 months ago, so now I'm like just rabid about like getting a child tax credit or something like that.
Yeah.
Your priorities shift or whatever. But the reality is there's always going to be young voters. They're always going to care about this, and ignoring them entirely just because they might grow up and prioritize this lower, it's a huge missed opportunity, especially because, as I was saying earlier, climate policy is just economic policy, right? And so this is about who's going to create jobs for the next generation. So if we just blow it off as like, well, only young people care about this, you're missing a huge opportunity to create the next generation of Republican voters just straight up through economic growth.
That's a very valid point. My next question. What happens if we don't ever, it's so funny, I can hear the
sorry, the siren.
Yeah, no, you're fine. What happens if we don't fix what's going on with the climate in regards to like China? So we've kind of moved away from the belief that like you were saying, we moved away that like whether it's real or not, now we're talking like real tangibles. If we cannot get China under control, what happens? Does the world blow up? Is the sun going to come down? Like, what happens?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. In terms of like what happens is, we continue to see damage to the environment from their pollution, not just carbon pollution, but all of the other pollution that comes with industrial activity. The biggest consequence is less, I think, environmental. From my perspective, I shouldn't say less, but another consequence, I should say, is the economic consequences. Because right now, China is effectively burning a ton of coal, a ton of oil, a ton of cheap fossil fuels with basically no concern for the environment to fund the clean energy technology of the future, right? To build solar panels that they sell to Europe and America and they dump in our countries, right? And it's cheap and it's dirty.
Sorry, can you pause for 2 seconds? Can you define clean energy real quick?
Oh, yeah. So energy that is clean is, it's anything that is reducing emissions. So everything from, renewables like solar and wind and geothermal to nuclear to natural gas, getting away from dirtier forms of energy. And that also includes, fossil fuels with carbon capture technology. We have technology that literally takes the pollution that is produced by burning fossil fuels and stores it or uses it to make like carbonation for, soda, essentially. So, there's all kinds of fun innovations that are happening right now. So when the left demonizes fossil fuels or whatever, that's effectively demonizing a form of clean energy a lot of the time. But we need a diverse, all the above approach, and the left hates that. So anyway, sorry. That's a good question.
So, okay, yeah, sorry. So you were saying that China is using, they're releasing all the emissions to do clean energy to
sell to the rest of the world. Yeah. And so effectively, if we don't address their emissions, right, that's going to continue apace, and they're going to continue to be the preeminent, provider of a ton of clean energy technologies. Right now, they make like 90% of the world's solar panels. They're making wind turbines. They're making all kinds of technologies that America should be leading on, right? We should be making all of these different technologies that we sell to the rest of the world. So by not...
Wait, why aren't we?
One is the trade aspect, is that it's just cheaper to make stuff in China because their labor and environmental standards are terrible. And that's why we need to use trade policy to hold them accountable, to level the playing field. And we will see jobs come back here. When that playing field is level, China loses. America does things better. We know that, American liberal democratic capitalism, that's small L liberal, clearly, we know that that works better than communism. But when communists cheat the way that China does on the environment, they continue to have a leg up on us that's often feels insurmountable. I am saying that it's not insurmountable. We can definitely do it through a pollution import fee or some other kind of mechanism. But the more that we allow them to pollute, the more that they will not just hurt the environment, but dominate the 21st century economy.
Wow. Well, that's good information. I think my last question, and this was sent in by a viewer, and I'm going to ask it this way because it is funny, but it's actually very serious. Okay, and this person says, Greta Thunburg, hero or villain? So, do you think I'll rephrase it to make it a real question. Do you think she has helped? What do you think about using children? Well, I guess she's not a child anymore, but
Yeah.
what do you think about that? About her in general, I guess. Just what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, Greta is passionate, and that's about as diplomatic as I can get. I think unfortunately a lot of kids are taught stuff about climate change that's way more in the sort of doomer storyline. That's where you get a lot of these kids coming out of high school and college who think that they shouldn't have children or that we should reduce economic growth as an environmental thing. That they are convinced that the world's going to end, so they're depressed, all this kind of stuff. People like Greta are fueling that, but she's also a product of it. She's clearly been raised in this by her parents telling her that this is what's happening. But it's a great example of the opportunity that the conservatives have to engage on this issue with like incredible optimism, taking on that Reagan communication strategy of saying, no, it's not, insurmountable and apocalyptic, and no, we're not going to blame people for what's effectively a collective action problem, right? We're going to go out there and see how people can be part of the solution, how we can solve big problems, build the economy, reduce emissions, do all of this kind of stuff at once, and have an American abundance agenda rather than the sort of depressing degrowth agenda that folks like Greta want us to buy into. Again, I appreciate her passion. I'm glad young people are engaged on this, but I'm really, really concerned that the sort of extreme nature of these narratives really limits how effective we can actually be on solving the problem, but also B, like really consigning people to a life that's depressing, and it doesn't have to be. We can be pro baby and pro America and pro innovation and all that kind of stuff, while also being pro environment. And in fact, I don't think there's a way to be pro environment without being all of those things.
I really like what you said about the more of a positive spin on it, because I do think that has something to do with why some people kind of ignore it as well.
Yeah.
Like the idea that the world is going to blow up in 12 years is sad and it's depressing, especially those of us that are still trying to accomplish our goals, and it's like, oh, we only have 12 years. So it is. I think that if we stick with the positive route, and it does sound like there is hope in the future, like it's not the end of the world. It's literally not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Which also reminds me of another question that I have. So, what is the name of that movie that came out like 2 years ago?
Don't Look Up.
Don't Look Up. Yes. So that obviously was a metaphor for climate change. I think by the end, everybody was like, "Oh wow, da 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 da." What were your thoughts on that? Because I remember I texted you about that movie, but I know it was 2 years ago.
24 other people.
Give us some hope.
No, it's funny. Being a climate guy on the right makes you pretty. Sorry for the background noise. I'm here in downtown DC.
Okay.
When you're a climate guy on the right, actually, I'm just gonna wait until it's. Yeah, when you're a climate guy on the right, or anything environmental or whatever, you're pretty unique. And so whenever there's something like that, all of your right of center friends reach out and are like, "What should I think about this?" First of all, it's a bad movie. Adam McKay should be ashamed of himself. He's made so many other good things. He needs to stick to producing Succession. Anyways,
Oh, he made Succession?
he's a producer on it. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
What a
So
change.
yeah, so I think the funniest thing about Don't Look Up, other than the just preening sort of arrogant tone that it has, is
Mm-hmm.
that it using an asteroid as a metaphor is really frustrating. And what really is going to happen, and what I believe conservatives need to think about it this way, is if there was an asteroid that was really coming to crash into the Earth or whatever, America's response wouldn't be denial. It would be, how do I make money off of this, solving the problem? Yeah, right.
Yeah,
And so
yeah, yeah.
so you just need incentives. Sorry, I'll wait for I don't know why it honestly might be.
Is it going to the Capitol? Yikes.
No, it's probably the motorcade for the president. But anyway,
Oh.
there would be this immense effort to solve the problem, but also make money solving the problem, right? And so it's really frustrating that, again, we keep getting back to this issue of the climate denial debate or whatever. We can acknowledge that, like, there's a problem or whatever, but the best way to solve that problem is make it in people's financial interest to solve the problem, which is what capitalism does best. And that's why, I think America is the only country on earth who can actually functionally solve this problem or even address it sufficiently, is because that's the only way we're going to get out of this. And I think movies like that are basically, I mean, you're preaching to the converted, right? You're preaching to progressives who think the only reason that we don't have robust climate policies in America is because half America has been bamboozled by big oil or whatever. Which, on that, like, this is kind of a hobby horse of mine. But if big oil was the reason why we don't have climate policy, big oil, according to Sheldon Whitehouse, has given like $20-some million, and that's like the most generous number to members of Congress in recent years. The budget for like a generic, 501c3 environmental organization, or a 501c4 environmental organization in DC is about $500 million. So if it's really only that big oil is buying off Republicans or whatever, they should just give $25 million and solve the problem completely, because it's not a money thing. There is this is kind of it's kind of a tangent, and you can cut this if you want. But it drives me nuts that folks on the left think that there's only two reasons why Republicans don't support their climate agenda, and it's either that we're stupid, or that we're convinced, or bamboozled into believing something. The reality is, we just don't like their ideas. We just don't like their policies. Even if we care about the climate, I don't want to see a massive expansion of the regulatory state. I don't want to see billions to potentially trillions of dollars of my tax dollars going to the next Solyndra, which, for our younger members of the audience, was a solar company that during the Obama years they gave tons of public money to, and it ended up going bankrupt. I don't want to see that stuff happening. So that's why I oppose the left's climate agenda. It's not because I don't believe it's real, or I'm, convinced that the PragerU videos that I've seen were really compelling, or anything like that. It's their ideas are bad, and I, as a conservative, am really offended by their ideas half the time. So hey.
No, that's good. That's a good one to end on. Is there anything else though that you want to add that you think the audience should know? Any books or podcasts you would recommend if people want to listen more or learn more?
I would say the energy space is really, really it requires a lot of esoteric knowledge to kind of get into it. So I would say, doing your own research, following along on a lot of this stuff is really, really hard. So there's not a great way to get into it. But what I would do is, of course, number one, follow me on Twitter. It's at cjohnsonyccd. But I would say just focus on, just be on the lookout for when energy or climate come up in regular political discussion, regular political podcasts, and realize, one, how often that is the case, and two, take note of how often China is brought up, how much policy is even part of the discussion, that kind of stuff. Just be attuned to that kind of stuff. That's where you're really going to learn a lot of the nuances here. Because if I start recommending like energy podcasts and stuff like that, if you aren't like a commodities investor, it's not going to be super interesting. But yeah, stay engaged politically. Ask your members of Congress what they think. But focus on solutions. Don't focus on whether they believe in it or not. Especially if you have a member of Congress, as is much more normal now, that's like 75, 80 years old. Not to say anything wrong with that. But there's going to be some pretty standard answers there. I'm kind of winding here. Sorry. But yeah, just pay attention to when people talk about it, how they talk about it, and are they actually talking about solutions, or are they just demagoguing on this issue, either to blame Republicans for climate change, or are they on the right trying to just avoid hard questions about policy?
That's good. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Chris. I really appreciate it. And I learned every time you've come on, I've learned. And I think everybody else has learned something too. And since you listener have learned, go ahead and leave that 5-star review. And if you didn't feel like it was a 5-star episode, just wait till you hear a 5-star episode and just make sure you leave the 5-star review. Also, if you are listening on Spotify, you can leave 5 stars there. If you're listening on Apple Music, after you leave your 5-star review, go ahead and leave or 5-star rating, leave a 5-star review. So go ahead and comment something that you learned. Oh, also at the end of, or on Spotify, you can ask questions. I'm trying to think of a good question. I'll think of a good question that we can ask everybody to engage on Spotify. But on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, like all that stuff. And I guess that's it. Once again, Chris, thank you so much for coming on. If you guys have any more questions or want to talk to him more, I'll leave his Twitter. You can also, I'm sure you can reach out and he'd love to have a conversation with you. I guess that's it. Thanks everybody for listening. Bye.
Thanks, guys.